Hello, fellow mech warriors, Mage Leader here. It's my second time recording this because the first time I tried my audio got fucked up, but we're gonna try this again and see how it goes, and I'll try to hit all the points I got on my last recording. I've been working on various projects on the channel, trying to get everything ready for the next big video when some news broke, and I thought that it was actually kind of worth covering. I'm not going to be the first one to the thing by a long stretch, because initially I was like, it's a Gundam thing, and I like Gundam, it's not really what my channel's about, but I took a closer look, and I noticed some things that are familiar that made me actually do a bit of a double take. So for those of you who haven't heard yet, I'm here on the Sprues and Brews website, which I've never used before, but they seem to be pretty chill. Bandai has announced that they're releasing a Mobile Suit Gundam tabletop game, which is pretty neat. Now, I know a lot of people have wanted some form of official tabletop thing for Gunpla for a while. There's a lot of fan-made stuff where it's actually designed around the high-grade model kits, where you build them, you set them on the table, and you can use different abilities that way. There's been a lot of fan-produced stuff that way. So, but a lot of people have been kind of wanting something official for a while. So, now we've got this, which is interesting to me. So, these are the minis that we've got. So, it's not using the actual Gunpla kits, it's using minis. They come on sprues like this, with the typical Gunpla plastic. And you're going to snip them out. It looks almost like a Warhammer mini here. And probably going to glue them together. These don't look like they're snap fit like the Gunpla kits are. And Gunpla kits usually don't require any painting. This is coming all in one color. That means that Bandai can produce these in large numbers very, very cheaply. Which is cool for me because that stuff is getting more and more expensive. So for the price of like an option set, even like if that, for one of like your grunt suits that they normally sell for like $5, they can shovel out a ton of these. So I don't think production numbers are going to be an issue here. They can easily make tons and tons and tons of these things. But if you're looking at these minis, you may have noticed something a little bit familiar down at the bottom. Now, to be perfectly clear, Battletech, obviously, is not the only game system to use hex spaces and hex maps. It's one of the more common ones. It provides a more strategic depth than a basic grid. Tons and tons of games do this. But it is a giant robot game using a hex map. And some of the footage that I saw even showed like different types of terrain on the hex maps for the different mobile suits to navigate. It's going to be very interesting to see how they handle that, because a lot of these things, if they don't just outright fly, can at least jump large distances, while others, namely this one here, really can't. Another interesting thing to note is that we have what appears to be different size classes. So we've got these mobile suits here on 1 hex space, but then we've got the Unicorn here, which is on 2, and I'm wondering if that's going to play in. And then we have the Archangel here, a whole ship, on 3 hex spaces, which is very fascinating to me, the different sizes that we have for these minis. I wonder if that's going to play some sort of strategic element. I'd be shocked if it didn't. You can see the Sinanju here also gets 2 hex spaces. And they could easily have modeled this so that it was just on 1, but I think that there's going to be different size classes, probably with different point values. Also, I think it's hilarious how the ball, there's 2 of them on 1 hex space. That's really funny to me. And appropriate, because it's a piece of junk. But yeah, this is obviously going to have some level of strategic depth to it. They've put thought into this. It's not a measuring tape type of game. It's got a definite hex grid system. So it's going to be a little bit different from something like Alpha Strike. I would highly doubt that it's going to be as detailed as classic Battletech, because let's be real, like Gundam abilities are kind of nebulous and not easy to quantify and assign number values to. But I don't know, it might be. It's probably not going to simulate things like actuators and gyros and all that other stuff, but I would say it's probably going to be somewhere between the level of Alpha Strike and Classic Battletech, just based on the images that I'm seeing here. And I think that's going to be a pretty cool thing, 'cause I know there's a lot of people who don't have the time for Classic Battletech, but they also don't like how quick and somewhat shallow Alpha Strike can be by comparison. This might turn out to be a sort of happy medium going off these images. Then there's going to be a fairly low unit count per game as well, from what I'm seeing. So these are the starter sets that are coming around. And we've got pricing information here, which is actually pretty nice. Coming out in July. We don't have a whole lot of information on the rules as of yet. We've just got some product shots. I expect that as we get closer to the release date, we'll see more detail in this sort of thing. But these are the starter sets, and these are a little bit confusing and a little bit interesting to me, because there's two different types of starter sets when it comes to tabletop, right? You've got your starter army box, where you're going to get into a group and you want your specific faction. You want your starter box, and it's meant for you as a single player to build these units so that you can now join in and play against other players. But there's another type of starter set that tabletop games will have as well, where it's enough for 2 people to play. And looking at these, I honestly can't tell which these are supposed to be. Because on the one hand, we've got like this Heroic Beginnings one with the Granddaddy Gundam and the Aerial Gundam, which thank God is the only Witch from Mercury representation in the tabletop game so far. Hopefully it stays that way, because that anime blows. But you've got these two. These are hero suits in one set. That would not imply that they're meant to fight each other. But yet, right next to them is the Gundam Wing box. And, like, we know that Death Scythe is in the lineup from the pictures here. So you could have had a couple mobile suits that are on the same side in this set. But no, it's packaged with the Tall Geese, a rival suit. And then coming down here, we got the Zeon's Rush set with the Sinanju and the Zaku 2, both of which are Zeon. So you'd assume they'd be on the same side. And then you've got the Seed Strike box here, which comes with the Ailstrike and the Aegis, which are rivals who fight each other in the anime. So I don't know if these are meant to be single army sets, or if they're meant to be head-to-head sets. Maybe it's both. Maybe this is a game that you can play 1v1 with your miniatures and still have a decent amount of game time. Maybe these are kind of meant as individual things, and these are meant as head-to-heads. It could be both. But either way, it's a fairly low number of minis for having a game. You either got 2 or 4. And that's a very small number of units on the board, which says to me that each unit is probably going to stay on the table for a decent amount of time if the game is going to have any legs to it at all. I think that's a very promising thing. That says to me that the rules are going to have a decent amount of depth, and that the game is actually going to progress at not exactly the most lightning of pace. So hopefully they don't make it drag, but these are supposed to feel kind of like epic duels between these mobile suits, and Gundam is really well suited for that, because it's a franchise that's kind of famous for very long, drawn-out scenes where 2 guys fight in their giant robots while screaming at each other about their conflicting ideologies. Like, that's kind of the bread and butter of the Gundam franchise. So it's very interesting to see this sort of alignment with where the products are falling. Now, the other thing that's interesting is the price point. So this game is kind of meant to run in tandem with a separate card game, from what I'm picking up. I don't know if the cards are actually part of the tabletop game or not. It seems like they're 2 separate entities, because you can buy just card packs, but then you can also buy packs that have minis and cards. So I'm not sure exactly how that's going to go. Based on these product shots here, this almost looks like its own TCG. And interestingly, the minis in these photos have circular bases and not hex bases. This may just be like an earlier prototype shot before they had the whole game system finalized. But there's a difference in the basing here, which is very interesting to note. But the card game, it also has its own logo. So that could be something completely separate, and they're just kind of part of the same toy line, I guess. A little hard to tell. But you can get a card pack for about $12, and these starter sets are going to cost $35, which is a little odd to me, because that seems like a pretty high price for 2 minis. Granted, they're very detailed, very nice minis, and it's not Games Workshop price. It's still pretty stiff, especially by Bandai standards. I mean, $35. $35 will usually get you, like, a high grade. That'll get you into real grade territory in terms of, like, the full-size model kits. So a little funny to have 2 minis for that price, especially given that, like, this is just a normal A1 runner. Like, those of us who build Gunpla, we see these things all the time, right? This is hardly a substantial amount of Bandai plastic. Very interesting that that's the price point they've settled on, but it's not egregious. It's a little more expensive than, like, your Catalyst plastic, and it's certainly going to be much higher quality than that, because those are kind of yikes. But it's not Games Workshop price either, so it's somewhere in the middle. And if we're talking, if this is actually enough of a starter set to get you genuinely going in this game system, then $35 isn't a terrible asking price. When you look at other game systems and how much it costs to kind of get your foot in the door, I mean, good lord, $40K if you want a decent starter box. Those little combat patrol boxes that they sell are like $80 fucking dollars. So, or at least they were several years ago when I was looking at them. They're probably more expensive now. Like, those things are substantial in their price. Or if you look at an army box for something like Black Powder or War for Middle-earth, I think it's called, you know, those are pretty pricey in comparison. So if this is actually a decent starter box that are kind of intended to get you going, I don't know if you're intended to collect more than one of these. It's a little hard to tell at this moment in time. But that's not a horrible price. There's one final thing I want to talk about with this system. So on the whole, I think it's pretty promising, and I'm cautiously optimistic for it. But there are some rumblings coming out that give me a little bit of concern, and that is that I've heard, I can't confirm this, and I don't think there's any information one way or the other so far, but it's very possible, and a lot of people are speculating on this, that this game is going to be heavily gacha focused. And if you don't know, gacha is short for gachapon. It's basically, you know, blind boxes. Like, you know, the Battletech salvage boxes. You buy a little box, there's a single mini inside, you don't know what it's going to be till you open it. From what I've heard, this game is going to be very heavily gacha focused. And I hope to God that is not the case. Because if there's one thing that really frustrates me about a lot of these tabletop systems now that are doing this sort of thing, it's that you can't just buy what you want. You have to get a bunch of other stuff that you don't want first. It's the reason why I wish that we had the individual next, like, Ironwind cells, as opposed to these Lance boxes that Catalyst puts out, where it's like, I only want one of the minis in this thing, but I have to buy all 4, even though I already have the other ones, or they're just new variants of old ones, or I don't like these ones. You have to buy the whole set. And I really hate the idea of buying blind boxes and just over and over and over again, constantly opening these packs and getting the common one again and again to where you have a shelf full of them in the hopes that eventually you'll find the one that you want. I get that the game companies make more money that way, but it's very frustrating at the consumer level to not be able to just go and buy the thing that you want to get, and to play this childish game of, I hope I get it this time. It's also going to really fuck the aftermarket for it, because obviously some are going to be rarer than others, and that's going to drive their price up, and then it's going to be more prohibitive to get in because people are going to buy the more powerful ones on the secondhand market. The people who have more money will do that, and then the people who maybe don't have as much money to spend on the hobby will be at a massive disadvantage. So I'm really, really hoping that's not going to be the case. But I have heard some rumors about that, so take that into account when you're getting hyped for this. Even with that, though, I'll admit, this looks like it has a lot of potential to be a really cool gaming system, so I'm going to keep an eye on it. If any new breaking news comes out about it, I'll definitely talk about it. But yeah, this looks like it could be a lot of fun. And, you know, I've been a Gundam fan for a long time. I've been a Gundam fan for longer than I've been a Battletech fan, to be perfectly honest. So, we'll take a look around July and see how it goes. Hopefully distribution's not too much of a problem. I know it's coming from Japan, so it's going to be very interesting. I wonder how the translation's going to be on the rule set, if that's going to be straightforward. Because if you've ever read some of Bandai's instruction manuals, they've gotten better about it over the years, but some of those older ones, you look at the English translation in them and you're like, good grief. So we'll see how it goes. But that's about all I've got for right now. Very promising, very interesting. Keep an eye on it. Until next time, this is Mage Leader, signing off.